Hello everybody and welcome to the Alien vs Predator Galaxy podcast. This is episode 77 and I'm your usual co-host Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks. And joining me is my usual partner in crime, Ridgetop, aka Adam.
Hey everyone.
And we've got a special guest on this this episode. If you're, particularly familiar with the background, the behind the scenes of the Alien and the Predator films, it's a name that might be a little familiar to you. You might have heard it once or twice. They had something to do with putting the monsters on the screen. I'm not quite sure. We're going to find out today. But we are, of course, talking to Alec Gillis of ADI. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. I always like to gab about aliens and predators.
Funny, we do too, actually. A whole, several hundred hours so far, probably.
Just a little hobby.
You've probably talked more about them than I've spent time making them, so.
I'd actually be interested in those numbers, but that might not be of interest to the listeners. But I will hand it over to Ridgetop to kick us off, and you can listen to the person you probably listen to this podcast for chat.
So first off, we just would like to thank you for taking the time to sit and talk with us today. It's very much appreciated. Before we get into it, we'd also like to congratulate you on the opening of your exhibit in the Hollywood Museum. For our listeners in the States, be sure to check it out if you get the chance. We also have a tradition of asking our guests about the first time they experienced the franchises we're going to be discussing. So, Alec, do you remember the first time you saw Alien? I assume it was prior to working on Aliens. And do you also remember the first time you came across Predator? I believe you were working with Stan Winston at that point, but you didn't work on the original film.
Well, let's take it in sequence, in chronological order. Alien, I remember I saw, it must have been in 78. I was at a convention, a Starlog convention, and I saw a slideshow. I can't remember who the guests were, but it was a slideshow of the sets. And there were no creature pictures, but the sets and some of the costumes, like the space suit, the samurai style space suit. And I was blown away. And I remember there was a guy sitting behind me who somehow, I was very jealous of them. This was pre-internet. So this, I think I was about 19 or so, then 18 maybe. And there was this kid behind me about my age, and he had a face hugger that he had made out of cotton and latex, and he was carrying it around. He had it perched on his shoulder, and I'm like, I'd never seen anything like it. Like, what is that thing? He said, "Oh, this is a creature from the movie." And I'm like, how the hell does a guy my age, with no connections how did he find this out? So it was because I was into creature effects at the time. I was making things. So I was very upset that someone had that scoop on me, but looking very much forward to seeing the movie. When I did see the movie, I went with a friend, and we were out in Brea, California, which is not far from where I grew up in Santa Ana. And we saw the movie and sat there with our, jaws on the floor, amazed and impressed. And that guy was James Cameron that I saw the movie with. And just quickly, I know a lot of people on Instagram give me a hard time because they're like, will you please stop talking about Cameron? But it was a pivotal, thing in my life to meet Jim before he got into the industry and then work with him. But I had met him through an art teacher that taught at my high school, and her husband taught oceanography at Cal State Fullerton, where Jim was a student. And she said, "Hey, you like making monsters, special effects? This guy's doing that stuff too." And Cameron's about 6 years older than me, but I called him up and went out and saw his film Xenogenesis, that he had shot on 35 millimeter. And it was like, he was like heads and shoulders above me in talent and ability. So it was great. It was like having a big brother that was already, a starter on the football team teaching you things. So anyway, that was a kick because he and I saw Alien at the mall, when it first came out. And then 5 years later, he's directing Aliens. So that's how mercurial his rise was.
That's awesome. I don't think I've heard that story before.
And then in terms of Predator, I did work on the original Predator for Stan. I wasn't one of the, I wouldn't call myself one of the key artists on that because we were doing, what were we doing? Maybe Pumpkinhead at the same time, or maybe Monster. I can't remember. There was a couple projects going on. So I would jump in, like, I helped with the body cast of Kevin Peter Hall, which everybody did because he was so massive. It took all of us to mold him. And then I sculpted on the bodysuit as well. But, Steve Wang and Matt Rose were the lead artists on that. So I was kind of, just a support player. And I did not go to set with it either. In fact, when they packed off to go to set, Tom Woodruff and I stayed behind. Oh, there's a phone ringing. Tom Woodruff and I stayed behind and made a little short film in the Stan studio while everybody was in Mexico shooting Predator. So anyway, and then of course, a little bit more background on the Predator. When they came to Stan with it, it was when the film had kind of like, they pulled the plug and, they were talking about being dissatisfied with the creature, the previous draft of the creature. And Stan was very much a guy who loved challenges and he loved to rise to the occasion. He liked to be the superhero and save the day and all that. And Joel Silver was a big producer who was saying, you got to help me, Stan. And we only had, I think, 6 or 8 weeks to build that creature, the Predator. And we had just come off of Aliens and, we had done some pretty cool stuff, Terminator Aliens, I guess maybe. I don't think Leviathan, but, Monster Squad, things like that. And the studio was really on the map at that point. And we begged Stan not to take this movie because we just didn't think there was enough time to do anything great. I remember quoting, saying, look, Stan, Rick Baker is doing Harry and the Hendersons. He has a year to do a single character. You want us to do something in 6 weeks? And Stan was like adamant. He said, guys, I'm sorry, but you don't get to decide what jobs I take. Basically, I'm doing this, whether you're helping or not. But Stan was also a great cheerleader, so he kind of pumped us up and convinced us it was possible. And he was right. He was absolutely right. He threw himself into the design. He was just constantly drawing. And he was also excellent at choosing the right people for the right tasks. And to pick Steve Wang and Matt Rose, who were really young but super talented guys with tons of energy, to put them in as the key artists was a great move because Steve had the color scheme in his brain. He had all the amphibious stuff, and he was a whiz with an airbrush and doing something really fresh there. And Matt Rose is just an awesome sculptor, sculpting the head. And Stan proved us all wrong, and I'm glad he did.
An ongoing but friendly argument that we tend to have on the AvP Galaxy boards is about the skull in H.R. Giger's original Alien suit. Do you like it, do you not like it kind of thing. As a creature designer, I'd be really curious to hear your opinion on that human skull. Are you pro or anti-skull in the Alien?
Well, I think that it is a genius. Like so much of Giger's work, it is a genius touch that I'm happy that I didn't really realize it was there in the first viewings of the film. It wasn't until the behind the scenes that I really that it registered in my brain. Oh my God, there's a human skull in there. That just is. It's almost like an Easter egg for me. It's so subtly presented in the film that I think it works beautifully. If I was to say from the get-go, to me, it's an eyeless creature, and that transparent dome is the thing for me that is really the hook. So I probably am a little more on the less thrilled about the skull eyes sockets inside, meter. If you were to look at it as a little kind of a meter with a needle. However, it matters so little to me because it isn't in my face. In fact, if not that anyone can see the Pred Alien in AVPR, but we prominently displayed the eye sockets in that. So there must be something about it I like. So I don't know. There you go. I love the creature. I think Giger's original Alien is pretty much a perfect design. So the amount that I was aware of those eyes, which was next to nothing, is perfect for me.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think it works best as like a very kind of subtle effect.
I am losing this argument so badly.
You love the eye sockets?
I really... Look, I get the appeal of the eyeless sort of feature, but I also find the idea of this empty skull terrifying as well. I mean, it's probably the main thing I love about Jet his design. I really dig that that skull. But fair enough, I will continue losing with grace and continue asking questions.
I will say that what's brilliant with it, that what's brilliant about it is that the 79 alien is birthed, the host is a human being. So in my book, it has always taken on characteristics of its host. And that's a characteristic of the host. And maybe it's a useless, just a vestige of mimicry or human DNA or whatever that is in the alien that doesn't really, it never evolved the eyes. To me, it's very interesting. My big concern about it would be if you created an alien with eye sockets like that it would look corny. Oh, wait a minute. I just criticized the newborn, didn't I?
You do see that in one of the video games as well. In Aliens Colonial Marines, they have a Giger-style alien, but without the dome. That's just the exposed skull. And yeah, it does look a little silly.
Well, it's interesting. Tom Wood sculpted the head in Aliens, and Cameron had us remove the dome, which I was very much against. But his logic was, look, this is a stunt movie. We're going to be doing things with this alien that they never did in the 79 alien. And that dome's going to be cracking constantly. To which, my response was, well, then we'll just have more. We'll just make a bunch of domes. And we've done that subsequently without any problem. I don't think Jim was as familiar with some of the durable plastics. He just thought it was going to be shattering like glass every time a guy took a fall, and that's not the case. But having said that, in Aliens, Tom sculpted the head that did not have a dome. The front of it has no eyes. So I think, Cameron wanted to maintain the eyeless look without a dome.
Did you guys never get as far as having any dome on the aliens at all? Because, it is a story that Cameron, said what he said, that they'd break. But my memory of it was that they were breaking, which was why it was gotten rid of, not it would break.
No, we never made them.
Okay, fair enough.
We never made domes. It was his certainty from the get-go. And anyway, and the movie's great. So you have people who embrace that because they love the movie. If the movie had not been great, people would say, and not only did the movie suck, but they screwed up the alien, all that stuff.
Yeah, you've always had kind of a fan preference argument between the domed heads and the ridged heads. And I was honestly happy to see it come back for AVPR, but it did mess with a couple of fan theories, how they were like, well, that it's a result of the aliens aging, which is why they're ridged headed and aliens. But I've always just took it as a design difference.
Yeah, there's it's very quaint and naive a lot of times when I read fan theories, because you're like, no, that's just the directors, the Strauss brothers, for instance, like aliens more than they like Alien, and they don't like the dome. So out went the dome, and nobody's plotting these things or structure or, lovingly taking into account any kind of mythos. They're just doing what they think looks cool.
So now that the Predator has just wrapped up its theatrical run with its Chinese release, we were hoping that this time around you could chat to us in a little more detail about the film. Have you had the chance to? I assume you have seen the finished film, and what did you think of it?
I enjoyed it. I'm a huge Shane Black fan. He's a great guy. He's very calm and even-keeled. He listens. He's collaborative. And what I love most about his writing is that I think he has a great handle on what makes 80s films so great, because he, was one of the guys that created that, which is ensemble, which is repartee, buddy films. And I like it. I know that the film, I've read, people online and reviews and things. Some people say, oh, it's hilarious. The jokes are great and the characters are fun. And other people hate it for exactly the same reasons. I fell on the side saying, I love this, because the original Predator, to me, and you got to remember, I was a working professional when I saw the original Predator. I thought that it was I don't want to say it's a comedy, but it is tonally, there's a lot of comedy in the original Predator. And Shane Black is the wisecracking guy, and he writes those types of characters, So I thought that this film had more tonally in common with Predator than perhaps some of the AvP movies. This is the first solely Predator movie I've worked on since the original Predator. But I thought it tonally had more in common with the original Predator than some of the more recent efforts. So I did enjoy it.
From when Adam came to visit you guys last year, you mentioned that ADI's involvement with the film had a lot to do with your existing relationships with John Davis and Fred Decker. I was wondering what those first meetings, with the head honchos were like when you first met Shane to talk about, what he wanted you to do with this film. And
you mentioned Fred Decker. He is a huge supporter of practical effects as well as us. So he was, and he's another guy, him and Shane they're just great guys. They both, Fred in particular, was very interested in promoting a heavy practical effects build list. And Shane was as well. But sometimes, particularly with studios, when all the other players get involved and you start breaking down the list of what's a VFX shot and what's a PX shot, things don't necessarily evolve the way that we want it to, or that Fred wants it to, and sometimes even the way that it to, because there are realities of the machinery that kind of force the hand and send it in a certain direction. Like, for instance, the big upgrade Predator. We were actively designing that character, and our hope was, if you make him about 9 or 10 feet tall, we could potentially do something practical that might need some compositing. It might need you could have something on set, but you'd have to shoot it cleverly and et cetera, et cetera. And when you start getting into more in-depth meetings, you realize, the style of the movie or the flexibility that's desired really demands that this thing be CGI. The way they are conceiving of the action sequences and the way the camera's moving, and like we could say, let's do a guy in a suit and comp him in. And if everyone was super thrilled with that idea and said, yes, we like the tactile presence of a man in a suit, and it's always been that way with the Predator, so let's keep it that way, then you would go through whatever steps would be needed to support that technique. But when you have more about the style of the film and the style of the action and how that's going to be shot, then the technique becomes subservient to that. The effect of the character becomes certain. Like for instance, if you want to have the camera racing across the ground up to the from a distance up to the upgrade, and then swirl around him in a Michael Bay style while guys open fire on it, that's a little tough for a composited thing, because tracking of objects and planting that 3D CGI object into a plate is a lot easier to do with CGI than it is to plot do all the math and plot that move where you shoot your plate, and then months later on a green screen stage, you match and scale adjust and use motion control, to lock your composited character in. That's a different animal altogether. And I think studios get a little worried about that. And at some point, an executive says, wait, why? So we can have a man in a suit? Oh, that's dumb. Let's just do this thing digitally, and then he can leap 30 feet, that kind of thing. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer to say that I think that Shane, Fred, Tom, and I were very excited about the practical possibilities for the film. And not surprisingly, that practical approach became limited down to 3 characters, 2 of which were cut from the film ultimately, and then so it's ultimately 1 character.
So the idea of a practical realization of the upgrade was dropped really early on then.
Yes, and in fact, here's another thing: the way things go in movies is that when that was dropped, then the thought was, well, now it's a digital creation, so the design of it should go to the digital department. So we did not. Our design work was stopped, and it was taken over by the digital department.
What about the practical half-side stand-in that they used on set? Did you guys not make that either?
That was Todd Masters, I believe. It was half of the Predator, but it was full size.
Right.
And that was just for lighting reference, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah. So they would, eye lines and lighting reference. This is a big, heavy thing. It was a big, like a nice silicone prop. But it was kind of like, as I recall, it was maybe down to the waist or belly button or something. And
from what we've seen.
Yes.
But you guys, you still did the conceptual artwork for the design of the upgrade?
No, I would say that is not our design.
Okay.
We did other designs, which we'll be releasing on our YouTube channel, Studio ADI's YouTube channel. Subscribe now.
Links in the post.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we'll show you at least how far we got on the design. The dog was more of our intact design, although they did change it. When you're designing things strictly for digital use, it's a little bit different. You don't build it, so you don't you finish the design, you turn over the ZBrush files, and you're not sure how it's going to be used or whether or not it's going to get changed. And they did in fact change the design of the dog. But I can look at that and go, oh yeah, I see. There's our, 70% of that is ours.
And since ADI last worked on a Predator film, Greg Nicotero's KNBFX worked on the most recent film before that, Predators. Mm-hmm. Did anything they did in terms of suit construction on Predators influence your approach with the Predator? Not really, because Shane wanted the Fugitive Predator. It's funny because the Fugitive Predator, came about after the film was done. It's a good name, but we were just calling it the original Predator or Pred 1. So anyway, Fugitive Predator, Shane wanted to make sure that it harkened back to the original Predator, Stan's Predator. So we changed facial features a bit and, maybe made him, just did what we thought would look cool. But his color scheme is very much the original. We darkened him down a little bit more than the original, but there are differences. But he's definitely supposed to look like, if you think of three, that we built three characters, one Fugitive Pred and two Emissary Predators. Those two Emissary Predators were more farther afield from the original design. The Fugitive Predator was meant to be the thing that kind of anchors you and makes you feel like, hey, I'm looking at a direct descendant of the Stan Winston Predator. And then the other two guys were the variants. And when those two guys left, then you were left with something that, looks like the original Predator, and whether that you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's how it shook down. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition because the Predator did, as far as the body goes, did look like a very classic style Predator, but the armor was a lot more modern, a lot sleeker than we're used to seeing on Predators. Yes, you're right. And I will say that this was another unusual situation on the previous AvP films, and on every Predator movie, at KNB, we did the same. But we would design and create the Predators as well as their armor and their weapons. And in this case, all we did was create three naked Predators. And the production designer and his team designed the mask and the armor. Weapons were created by the props department. Anything that had to do with cloth in the costume was done by the costume department. So it was very much a fragmented and spread around.
So what was the reasoning behind that split in responsibilities? Was it just division of labor?
It was a division of labor, but I'm not sure what the reason was. I think initially I thought, okay, you have to understand the economics of this. When you shoot we shot in Vancouver. When you shoot in Canada, there's tax incentives. So they get something like 27% or 30% or 33% back for every dollar they spend in Canada. So every dollar they spend in Los Angeles is undesirable.
Right.
They're stuck because there isn't really exactly the talent pool in Canada to do exactly what we do. But they can get armor makers, they can get props makers, they can get costumers. So they take that off our plate and send it up that way. This commonly happens even on the big shows like AVPR, for instance. They did not think it was a good idea to, they never broached on AVPR taking armor and weapons away from us. But they did say things like, well, look, gore. How about gore? Can somebody up here do the gore? What about finishing pieces? So we will habitually, what happens is we will make a certain amount. We'll either say, yeah, okay, have a local makeup person do all the gore. Take that off our plate. And then you guys have, some number of dollars that you're getting your tax incentive for. In the case of AVPR, we did leave some of our work unfinished, and we set up a shop up there where we brought in talent and we supervised the finishing using Canadian artists. So what we do is we reduce our build budget in Los Angeles and move that money and the projects up to Canada and do that. So that's the kind of thing that we are always prepared for. But this one went even further than that, which was to really just split the character up into multiple groups. And I don't love that idea, because I think that you end up with a lot of redundancies. Like, for instance, to dress Brian Prince, I think we had 5 departments standing around him. So you had this gaggle of people. Like, whereas you can go online on our YouTube channel, Studio ADI's channel, subscribe now, and you can watch a video called Dress a Predator. It is, I think that's what it's called. And it's 2 guys in a truck, and it takes 2 people to dress a predator. But in this case, with this division of labor, when you have props people standing back waiting with a shoulder cannon, and somebody else waiting with a mask, and someone else with you end up with about 8 people standing around dressing a predator. So I don't know how that's not efficient, but perhaps the tax incentive dollars that they got back in the overall scheme of things, perhaps that was a money saver for them.
Fair enough. I can completely believe that.
And I'm not, by the way, just to clarify, I'm not necessarily complaining about that. I would rather do everything on the character and have complete control over it, and give the director design options that maybe other people would not give him. However, I can completely understand, since this is a business, I can completely understand why a producer would say, let's split it up and have ADI doing the bare minimum work.
As far as the concept art goes, are you sometimes getting concept art from outside sources that you kind of have to build your designs based upon?
Sometimes. It didn't happen in this case because they just totally took the work, right? Like, so we didn't have to make a mask, an armor mask that someone else designed, because they hired someone else to build it. All that talk about tax incentive, by the way, is only a partial explanation, because ultimately they went with Quantum Effects, which is based here in Los Angeles, to build the armor parts. So I'm not exactly sure, I could get, if I wasn't a battle-hardened, scarred veteran like the Wolf Predator, I would be like, well, how come you didn't come back to us with the mask, et cetera, et cetera? We didn't have a chance to bid on that. So I don't know, but it's all economics. That's what it is. And what you realize after being in the business for a while is not to get offended or upset about the way the economics shake down. Now, sometimes you can have issues with whether or not the economics actually do work the way a producer thinks they do, or sometimes there are things behind the scenes I'm not privy to that have to do with convenience and other deals and things like that. So this is not a complaint or a bitch session about it. It's just meant to explain to your dear listener, dear reader and listener/listener. But if you want to know more about why things go digital and why things stay practical, we do have a fantastic video called CG or Not CG. Did I mention the YouTube channel, Studio ADI's channel on YouTube?
No. Tell us about it.
We have over 140 million views and 250,000 subscribers. New content going up whenever we get around to it.
And yeah, I've watched that video, and it's a really interesting kind of delve into just the politics behind the studio system. And sometimes it can be frustrating, most notably, I'll always bring up the Thing prequel, how frustrating that is for me. But studio's going to do what they're going to do sometimes. Yeah. And if it works, it doesn't bother anybody. Nobody notices, nobody talks about it. It's just when it doesn't work that we get our knickers in a twist.
With the Predator, Shane Black wanted to make the Predators more agile than the previous incarnations, and went as far as to hire dancers and parkour performers with Brian Prince and Kyle Strauss, who are amazing guys, by the way. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't already, we did have an interview with them a couple of weeks. I get the plugs in too. I'm allowed them as well.
Oh, you should.
Head back to avpgalaxy.net/podcast and check out their episode. To bring that sort of agility to life, those guys were who Shane went to. In terms of creating the actual suits, did this focus on mobility, did it make your construction differ from the approach that was taken in the AvP films?
It really did not. I mean, everything that we do, our techniques are all designed to maximize mobility anyway. I think that a lot of that is a performance issue. Although I will say that on AvP, Paul Anderson, AvP1, Paul Anderson really wanted these guys to look heavily armored.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he wanted them to look like American football players, like those kind of proportions. He said, that if you were fighting human beings, unarmored human beings, you wouldn't need to be in this kind of armor, but you're fighting steel-skinned, biomechanical, acid-blooded aliens, so you better show up with battle gear. That was the concept for that, but by the time AvPR rolled around and we were back in the realm of kind of a specialized kind of ninja guy like the Wolf, we were able to get back to a little bit more of the original intent of the McTiernan film, and we were able to slenderize them and layer them less with bulky armor and all that kind of stuff. So that was our MO on this film, was to create nice, slender, flexible foam tech suits that fit the performers snugly and inhibited their movement as minimally as possible.
And that kind of segues into our next question. Studio 80I's worked on 3 different Predator films now, and like you were saying, they've had different visions from the directors. Like Anderson wanted something more imposing and heavily armored. The Strauss brothers wanted something more akin to the originals. And Shane Black, it seemed, wanted something more focused on movement. So which of your different takes on the creature has been the most interesting to work on and realize, would you say?
Well, I think that the Wolf Predator afforded us a little bit more of our own design freedom than the other 2 did, meaning that the directors were like, just make him cool. We love the original, so we were able to kind of like kick around ideas and come up with this idea that he is a veteran, that he's like the equivalent of like a 45-year-old guy. He's like Tom Berenger in Platoon. He's scarred up. He's got a bunch of gadgets and the whip, for instance, was our idea. That it's a very tactile kind of like badass weapon. That imagine if it was so serrated you could like cut an alien in half. And so there was a lot more fun to be had on that one. And then also the Wolf Predator was unmasked so briefly that we were emboldened enough to not feel like we had to use the performer's eyes. So we gave him mechanical eyes, which allowed us to change his facial proportions. Specifically, his forehead is more sloped back. We wanted him to look a little bit more like a predatory cat. When you use the performer's eyes, you always have the forehead right up above it and out in front of the eyes, right? So you can't really create that back-swept look of a predatory cat quite as well. But the upside of using the performer's eyes is they have good vision. And when there's a lot of stunts, you need good vision. So we were able to play a little bit more with the facial proportions on the Wolf.
So Scar and Fugitive were contact lenses and Wolf had mechanical eyes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I always liked how you got to see a little more of Wolf's face in the unrated cut of AvPR when he kind of swaps his mask with the other Predator and watches the playback. It was just good to see more of those effects in there.
Yeah. Well, he's I do like his look. There's another interesting design thing, that like people do design very cool Predators. Like there's lots of artwork out, on social media and some really great fun paintings and illustrations of Predators, but I don't believe any of them are actually trying to make it work over the eye spacing and eye size of a human being. And that makes a world of difference when you're designing a Predator. Like the 2 Emissaries, one of the Emissaries was played by Kyle Strauss, and Kyle has a smaller head than Brian, and Kyle's eyes are closer together than Brian's. So as a result, you can't just conveniently put a Brian Prince head on Kyle Strauss. It doesn't quite work. So you have to design everything around it. So the Predator head that was designed specifically for Kyle to wear was a smaller head than Brian Prince's head. And so but that's okay, because that's just the variations among human beings, I assume, are similar to the variations among predators.
Yeah, why wouldn't they be? Is that an issue you've ran into then with like various stunt performers or whatever? And I mean, I know like Ian Foyer came and did stand-in bits for Requiem when Ian White couldn't, and I think you reused the Ian White suit for him. So is that an issue that you run into?
In that case, not so much, because once again, the wolf predator had mechanical eyes, so the stunt head had its own eyes attached, and you would look through drilled out pupils, right? Still not the greatest of vision, but the eye spacing was not an issue on that. But body suit is definitely affected. Ian Foyer is about 6'7". Ian White is 7'1" or 2". So there is a difference in the way a bodysuit fits, a 6-inch difference, the way that fits. But if a guy is lean, it works better than if he was like shorter and stockier. And that was the issue we had on AvP 1. We had bulky predators. Their armor was bulky to begin with, and they were built around Ian White. And we did not have the budget to create costumes for each and every stunt character who played a predator. But we were assured by production that they would find us 7-footers in Prague, but they really couldn't. So we were putting those same costumes on 6'5" guys, 6'4" guys, 6'3" guys, and at that point they looked like little butterball turkeys, because like a forearm gauntlet and a piece of bicep armor all of a sudden are colliding because there's no arm length in there. In an ideal world, you would have all 7-foot guys. In Los Angeles, you go to community colleges and there's basketball players that range from 6'8" to 6'11". Then you're in a pretty good place. But myself personally, I've always felt that you start hitting, someone who's 6'5" in a predator suit, it's just not that impressive. You really need a 6'9" to 7'2" person in there. So, and Brian are both in the 6'9.5" or so range, 6'10". So those are good heights, and they're both slim guys. And that's another important thing. You got to have a slender person to work. I mean, they're athletic, of course, but they're not boxy bodybuilder types, where you're just adding rubber on top of somebody who's already shaped like an upright Volkswagen. There's nothing much you can do there.
That's fair enough. The Predator featured some connections to the AvP films in the way of the shurikens, Lex's spear, and what looked kind of like a Scar-style mask. This caused some discussion as to if they were deliberate references to the AvP films. I understand that you guys didn't handle the weapon design, but I kind of just always suspected that they were just props that ADI had easy access to, because you made those and they were included because of that availability. I was wondering if you knew anything about the story behind those.
Well, I don't know, other than that we were contacted by the props department to get some of that stuff because Shane specifically wanted those items in the film. I assume if he wanted to ignore that they existed, and not make a connection to the previous film, then he would have redesigned it and created something unique. But I believe that one of the interests of this film is to start bringing the lore together. As I mentioned, the Predator franchise hasn't necessarily been like in the Marvel universe. We've all become used to like interconnected characters and events and all that, because they were all plotted out in the 60s, 70s, 80s, what have you, in volume after volume of comic books. So there is actual precedence, and you can actually chart these things in a more kind of cohesive way. The Predator stuff is evolving as each film is made, and it's like, I think, Cameron did a great job as a hired gun director to come in and say, I can expand on this basic idea. And the universe has started to be created. And then, of course, when it went back to Ridley, he had his own ideas of how these things should be explained and what that universe is. So in the case of the Alien movies, I kind of feel like we've got like competing views of what the franchise is or what the backstories are or what the... I'm just saying that things are evolving. Like, they are not plotted in the way that the Marvel universe is. So I think fans tend to attempt to bring more order and logic to the Alien and Predator worlds than it actually does exist. And it doesn't mean that the fans shouldn't do that. That's not a judgment. I'm just saying that a lot of that kind of speculation is the fans are maybe in a way ahead of the studios.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for the franchises, especially with the looming Disney acquisition of Fox. A lot of people are wondering what that's going to mean for the different franchises.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that the Disney presence allows them to open up the universes of these films a little bit. Like, I could easily, Blomkamp's Alien 5, right? I don't have any insider information on that. But, I love in the old comic books, the what if, those were superhero, right? Like Superman what if stories.
Yeah. And Marvel as well, I think.
Yeah, why not? Or a graphic novel comes out and it's just an offshoot, right? Doesn't mean that like all this obsession with canon and all that, it I think starts tripping people up if we would relax a little bit and say, what's a cool alien universe story? Okay, out on a podunk planet, something happens, or is this part of the main story? Or, same with the Predator stories. I would love to see, I'd love to see a Predator movie that has no humans or very few humans in it.
You're not alone in that at all.
Yeah.
And I don't even need to see their home world. I'm kind of lean towards not seeing the Predator's home world.
Yeah, as far as canon goes, I couldn't agree with you more, Alec. I think it's good to respect it, but you don't have to be constrained by it. I mean, it depends on the franchise. Some franchises rely on it more heavily than others, but in terms of Alien and Predator, you just see so much variation. Like there's a comic coming out that is a what if story, which is William Gibson's unused Alien 3 screenplay, and we're really excited for that one. So yeah, personally, I've been saying this for a while, like I would like to see the movies take on more of an approach where you have different arcs and different alternate continuities. Like a lot of fans were miffed about what was going to happen with is Neil Blomkamp's film going to replace Alien 3, but I was always like, no, I love Alien 3. But I would like to see an alternate take to that. I mean, that's not a mark against Alien 3,
Yeah, and I think it's a kind of it's a little bit of a concrete and pedestrian way to look at things. That if anything changes too much, someone has raped my childhood.
I hate that saying.
You know what? Stephen King said it the best when he was being interviewed. I saw this interview years ago, and he was sitting at his desk in front of a shelf of books, and someone said, how do you feel about Hollywood ruining so many of your stories? And he said, they didn't ruin them, and he gestured behind him. There they all are, right? They're still there. Alien 3 will still be there if you prefer it over Blomkamp's Alien 5, I don't know. It's kind of like colorizing movies too. Like, who gives a shit? So you colorize a movie, big deal. There's still a black and white version.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to go back, though, to 1940s movies and put in tons of swear words, just because that's a form of color, isn't it?
True. That's entirely
Colorful
true.
language.
Redub some classic movies.
Yeah. Frankly, Scarlett, fuck off.
I watched a thing on YouTube earlier where it was R2-D2 dubbed, like some old sort of style gangster sounding fella from like the 40s, and it was hilarious.
That's funny. Yeah. Did you mention YouTube? Because I have a channel.
Oh, tell us, Alec. I don't think we're aware of it.
AVI's channel. We have almost 300 videos of behind-the-scenes, fascinating archival footage and some new footage too. By the way, have you gentlemen seen my installments of my little short film Playtime?
I've seen the trailer for it. There was a little teaser on Facebook.
Right now, sir. Those are excuses.
I will watch it soon. I promise.
Because you'll like it. If you're a fan of practical effects, you'll like it. It's a story of a little animatronic puppet from the 80s trying to navigate in a digital Hollywood today.
So is it inspired by Chucky at all? Like, it kind of gave me that vibe.
Yes, it should give you the vibe because he is a Chucky type. I just didn't want to get sued. So he's if you imagine like a low budget version of Chucky, maybe like something like the Charles Band version of Chucky, and he gets wind that they're rebooting his franchise, so he gets very excited, and he goes to the guy who made him back in the 80s to get a makeover. And I got Kevin Yeager to play the guy who created him. So it's fun. I think you'll enjoy it. It's autobiographical, by the way. I play the part of a movie producer, and they're paraphrased slightly, but quotes that I've heard from movie producers.
Oh, man.
In the scene, so it is as inside baseball as you can possibly want.
And we'll be sure to include the links to those videos in the news post
Oh,
for this podcast.
So it's the only reason I'm doing this podcast.
You know, it's funny we hear that kind of thing all the time.
I'm kidding. I'm joking. I told you I like talking about Alien Predator.
I will regret not seeing you play the president, though, since that Blomkamp. So was that fully filmed, or was that just planned as a trailer?
No, we did, I think, 4 episodes.
Oh, man. I would love to see that someday.
Yeah, and
that looked so good.
It was before Trump was even running. So this is why it was one of the things I'm continually impressed with Neil, is that even in that, he does a silly comedy about, like, what if a U.S. president squandered public resources and acted like a douchebag frat boy? And this is, it's prescient, right? Anyway, not to get too political, because you could easily say that it's based on George Bush and Bill Clinton as well, right? It's just taken to an extreme. But he decided not to release it because he felt like it was too... it's actually more restrained than a lot of stuff that's going on.
Well, you don't want to be labeled fake news either, do you?
Yeah, I could. You know, what I was hoping was he'd release it, and then I could jumpstart my actual presidential campaign.
Why the hell not?
It looked so funny. The trailer just had me in stitches. So
yeah, it was.
Hopefully someday.
It was pretty funny.
It looked like you guys had some genuine fun on that. Like you did the commercial ones as well, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, those were fun. So, you know, I come from the Roger Corman's. That's where I started. So
that's where you met Jim, isn't it? No, not met Jim. You worked with Jim on them.
Right. Yeah. No, I took Jim in. I got the interview at Corman's, and I was paranoid about my crappy portfolio, so I brought him along, and he had a great portfolio. So and then what I didn't realize was that it took them 6 months to hire us, because they kept going back and forth because Jim was so obnoxious. They didn't want to hire us. Isn't that funny? Isn't that ironic? I brought him in to ensure getting hired, and they were actually... Jim knows this, by the way. He's been told by the very... Because, and everybody ends up... Cameron is very loyal. He all the people who that worked together at Corman's, the Skotak brothers, Gale and Hurd, a bunch of other people, he has used them on various projects. And so everybody has a great relationship from the old days. And he knows that he was a 25-year-old unstoppable force who was sometimes like an obnoxious gifted child. Anyway, but you were asking so I come from the Roger Corman School of when people utilize what resources they have and make a project out of it. So Neil had a building that was Oates Studios, that was his place. And it was a furniture warehouse, like an appliance warehouse. And they had this kitchen, this big giant kitchen that they used to do like online cooking classes out of. So he just said, hey, let's do a cooking show. And that's where we shot. And we built a bunch of those props and crazy contraptions and stuff. And the way that evolved was, the way I got the role was, we built the Damasu 9000 with all those chopping blades, and it was built around a chainsaw. It was a big deal. And it was kind of dangerous and hard to hold because it was very heavy. So I was demonstrating it in the videos and saying, Neil, I don't know, who are you going to get to hold this thing? Because you could really injure yourself. And I said, hey, you know what? I've got the 80s hair. I can do this. I'm a very artificial person. So he was like, oh, okay, well send me an audition tape. And I was like, oh, well, if you're actually casting, then go ahead and cast. And then he was like, well, wait a minute. And so he gave me the role. And then when I was doing that, he wrote the Bad President stuff for me, and we went on and did that. So anyway, for 2 seconds, I was the next Charlton Copley.
Oh, that's brilliant. Anyway, On to Predator, because we're here to talk about Predator as well as YouTube
That's
and
true.
stuff like that.
I keep derailing it back to my YouTube channel.
You know what? I was gonna go there again, but I'm.
Nah. Well, now that we've done it, we have to make so many references that it gets funny again. Right now, it's not so funny.
Okay.
Predator questions.
This is something that we tend to see crop up on the boards, on the forums a lot when we're talking about the later Predator designs, and it's the resting position of the mandibles. In the first two films, they close in an almost X shape, but in the AvPs, they like a parallel kind of open look rather than closed. And we often see people wonder why. In fact, one of our community members, the old one, not her age, this is literally a handle, specifically wanted us to ask you in this podcast, was that a creative decision or was that a technical thing with the animatronics?
No, it's always creative. I mean, I guess I would ask the question, why do they have to close the way they did in the first two movies? Any more than the alien needs a dome or doesn't need a dome. And if you think of it that way, then a director can say, oh, I think this guy's got different teeth, Paul Anderson certainly did that with asking us to add teeth to the Predator in an attempt to make him more anthropomorphic and therefore more relatable to the Sanaa Lathan character. So those kind of conversations always happen. They always, we take into account what the director's looking for. We also will be there as representatives of the fans, but you have to remember that's a very difficult job to do because the fans don't agree.
Yes, we know that.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that we've learned over the years, that there are some people who don't, like I said, they don't want their childhoods messed with, and there are some people who accuse you. I saw that as a comment, like, with the Fugitive Predator. Somebody said, boring. Looks like the one from the first film. Come on, ADI, you're getting lazy. Well, all right. Or we diligently worked to create a resonance to that one, right? So I don't know what to tell fans who say, I like this, I didn't like that. Why was it this way? Why was it? There's tons of discussion that goes on in all these things. I don't know. That's probably a very unsatisfying answer.
If it's the answer, it's the answer.
Chance to do the to do another one. I will bring up that question when a director says, let's talk about the position of the mandibles. There's no discussion, sir. Take a look at this picture from 1985 or 87, and this picture from when was the other one come out? 92.
Yeah, early 90s.
Those are your choices. That's my thing.
When we were going over the list, I actually miffed Aaron because I thought that question was a little nitpicky, just so you know. So.
Well, I don't know. No, listen, man, the devil is in the details. So I'm glad that people are engaged, and I tease a little bit there because I have had, we all carry into the job or into the viewing or whatever, the experience of it. We all carry our biases and our preferences. And there have been times that I have gotten a note from an executive to change a sculpture or something, and I just think, you have no idea what makes this cool and at the end of the day, if I want 100% control over the character that I'm building, I need to build my own character, not be hired by someone to build a character for their franchise. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I don't know how that explains anything other than to say that we're all passionate about something and expressing. There's nothing wrong with expressing it. I sometimes I find myself like in a position like where we'll try to explain how our Deadpool video, for instance, on our YouTube channel, people will say, you guys don't have to defend anything. You did a great job. Other people will say, all the defending in the world doesn't make this good. You guys fucked up, right? Well, neither of those are what I'm not trying to defend myself. I'm trying to tell people how it works and how decisions are arrived at.
Well, that's the interesting stuff, in my opinion, anyway. Is the roadmap, it's the journey.
I agree. Now that we have social media, and particularly I'm a fan of Instagram. I'm on Instagram. Follow me, Alec_Gillis. Look, a different plug. But you can see such excellent artwork from all over the world. It's kind of like I liken it to like watching like, Ukraine's Got Talent or Bolivia Sure Can Sing or some show like that. It seems like everybody on planet Earth is phenomenally talented, singing, dancing, artwork, something, right? So at some point, the artwork itself, while it's interesting and visually cool, only is one part of the story. The other part of the story is, how do you do that artwork in a professional, or when you're under fire, or when things aren't going right? What are those stories about? And that right now in my career, that is what interests me, is like, how does anybody get really great work on screen, considering everything that we're all up against? We have a lot of resources to do it, but there's always some obstacle or barrier, and I want to know how people overcame it so that I can have some inspiration to overcome my own barriers.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we were going to ask about the Emissaries. So it's really well known that ADI designed the 2 additional Predators that ended up being cut from the film. We've seen some behind-the-scenes stills, and the odd comment from you guys still managed to get into the making of books. We were hoping to ask you a little about those guys, because it sounds like there was a great deal of exploration into what you were doing with the Emissary Predators. Tom mentioned something about giving them the Predator equivalent of a lab coat. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that at all.
Yeah, so Shane's initial idea for the Emissaries were that, as he said, rightly so, this is what I love about Shane. He said, we see the movies and we see the hunter warrior predators, but they arrive in these spaceships that don't necessarily seem like the kind of things that these guys themselves built. So his logic was there must be different classes of predators, just like there are different classes of insects or human beings, So maybe there is a science class of predators, a scientific class of the top minds that can actually design and build invisibility cloaking devices and interstellar spaceships and things like that. Who are those guys? Could we meet those guys? And maybe those are the guys that, if there is a civil war happening on the Predator world, maybe those guys have felt that they need to reach out to Earth to kind of like prepare Earth for an oncoming, to become a battlefield, or that things are going to go south soon. So our marching orders were, design me a couple of guys that look like they are predators, but they are the intelligentsia and the technical guys. So Tom's comment about like, a lab coat, pocket protectors, you go there, you think of those as the kind of like stereotypes, and then you're like, okay, now we can free our minds of those stereotypes and start thinking about what they might wear, how they might act, what they might look like. And the thing that excited me about the Emissaries was that Shane said he wanted to make them 2 older people, older characters. So like if one was like 70 and the other was like 60. So these guys are aged and wise and smart. So what does that look like? So we started doing design, and we were designing them as if they were naked, but we were also doing a bunch of potential costume work as well. They had a little bit, like we were going with, some looked very tribal elders. Others looked like there was a tribal look, but a combination of high-tech kind of plastic kind of fabrics and things like that were pretty interesting, that we will put up on our YouTube channel soon. And I think the notes that came back from the studio were, these guys look old, right? Like, it's funny that you'll do that, right? The directors will say, give me 2 old guys, and 2 old predators. You draw 2 old predators, and the studio's note is, they look old. So,
well, you did your job.
Yeah, that's right. So the studio, this is typical of the way a studio works. And this is why Shane is a success, is that he masterfully can deal with the concerns of a studio, because the studio execs are not necessarily deep into the fandom and the lore and the mythos of predators. They just go, uh-oh, they're kind of a sort of a broad stroke reaction, right? And you kind of have to, you definitely have to pay attention to that, because they're the ones funding the movie and you have a contract with them, et cetera, et cetera. But Shane's very diplomatic. So they had said, their concern was these guys look frail. They look like they can't fight. They're not threatening. And that is the essence of what a predator is. So that's where we go, okay, now the job is to start layering in some threat and some physicality, capableness, or lethalness or whatever, so that you feel like, even though, they're scientists, they're badass scientists, right? And so that's the challenge, is to layer in those things. So what we came up with was, well, let's think of like, who's an old guy that you could imagine could still be intimidating, or if you saw him in a fight scene, you might fit. And we thought, well, what about Clint Eastwood? Or maybe Clint Eastwood from the era of Gran Torino, right? He looks kind of like a badass, right? It's his scowl, it's his attitude. He's tall, so maybe we do that. So you give the guys a little more muscle mass. You take out the dowager's hump and the bad posture, and you make them a little bit more upright, and you make them a little bit more badass. And we settled on something with the studios, but to me, it was they still, like, the purity of what Shane was asking for was the most interesting jumping off point, and then it gets pulled back by the studio. And maybe that was a good thing. Maybe that was the fact that they didn't end up in the film is less about the characters or the success of that storyline, I think, and more about wanting to keep the momentum moving and not be distracted by these two other guys. I don't want to say I agree with them being cut from the film, but I can see why they were cut from the film.
And some of the photos that we saw of them, they have like it looks like a human designed military. Did you guys do those, or was that also Quantum?
No, that we did not do those, and I don't believe it was Quantum either. I think that was strictly a Canadian costume department effort.
Kyle, when they performed as those Predators, did you guys kind of have different ideas for their character, or was that all Shane's direction?
It was more about it was Shane's directing, and it was more about, like, we'll look at the way the two actors perform in the suit, and then we will kind of quietly between us start to look. Like Kyle had a good moment with, I think it was maybe Olivia Munn. Kyle had a couple of good moments. Oh, certainly one with Trevante Rhodes where Trevante offers the Predator a cigarette, and there were a couple of takes of it where the Predator takes a drag off of it and exhales. And then there was another one where the Predator takes it and just throws it away in disgust. But, Kyle had a nice kind of gesture, cocked to his head, so we can, like, play with the eyebrows and have him looking and, give him some expression that way. But because these guys kind of turn more into warrior scientists rather than scientist warriors, you know what I mean? Then it was just more about what's the physicality that the actors bring through it, rather than and they're secondary characters, rather than trying to create individual characters that resonate with you in the brief time that they're unmasked on screen.
I find it really interesting that the exploration of these guys went so far field, because when at least in terms of the fandom, and I guess in some of the films themselves, but when the Predators are aged up, they're given more quills, their hair's greyer, bluer. But with this one, they sound like some really interesting sort of, explorations, like the translucent dreads. Somebody, you or Tom mentioned that in one of the books, and then to settle on this kind of forehead protrusion as well on the finished designs from what we've seen anyway. So to branch out from the traditional sort of aged look, I think some of the exploration ideas that we've heard are really, really fascinating, really interesting.
Yeah, and we would. It's kind of, this is the way it always is in the franchises that we work on, is that we try to push boundaries and try to present some things that are really unique and that they may not be thinking of. And inevitably the process is, it's always reined back in by the studio mostly, who's like, well, we don't really, they're always a little cautious. We may be a little more exuberant to change things up and give some variations. Because, I look at things like the K&B's Berserker Predator. That thing was bizarre, right? And I think it's because in that case, Robert Rodriguez was given more authority to do what he wanted to do. I think he was bringing that movie in at a very reasonable price.
I think it was like 40 or something, yeah.
Yeah. So they were happy to be getting that, and they were giving him a lot of creative control. And also, K&B did a heroic job on that, because they only had about 8 weeks, 9 weeks to do all that work in that film. That was really almost a scary proposition for them.
That film was done so fast and so cheap. I think it's fantastic for the sort of resources and they had for it.
Yeah, Rodriguez is an amazing filmmaker, and the boys, Howard and Greg and their team, they really came through in short order, man.
Like Predators, the Predator also featured its own Predator dogs. However, the new film didn't use the existing designs from before. So what was the reasoning behind doing a new design for this film?
Well, once again, you'd have to ask Shane Black. And I say that, with all respect, because it is that is a decision that's made at the directing and producing level. But I think that, the logic that I apply to it personally is there's different kinds of dogs.
Yeah.
So let's see a different one. They don't all have to be German Shepherds on the planet.
Right.
Were there specific sort of design elements that Shane asked you to to sort of look at with this new breed, so to speak?
Yes, I think what he there was a conversation about the design of the dog from the Rodriguez movie, and I think he felt that they looked like battle weapons, or they were so like they're more terrifying. And what he wanted was a faithful hound dog. He wanted a very alert, erect. We were looking at like different dog body styles, and I think a boxer is one that he really liked. And because of the character in the early drafts, the character that gets shot in the head had a little bit more to do. He got shot in the head with a bolt gun, and the bolt was sticking out of his head, and that kind of scrambled his brains, and he became kind of part of the team, or he was similar to what's in the film, but he became more of a good guy. So I think he couldn't imagine using something that looked like a monster dinosaur in that role. He wanted something that the audience would go like, oh, now it's a cute thing, or it's a fun thing. Not cute, but it's okay. It's like a Mastiff or something, as opposed to a Komodo dragon. So yeah, that's what we pursued.
Making it sort of relatable as a friendlier thing, then.
Yeah, but the head was changed fairly significantly from what we did.
Was it the dreadlocks? Were those added?
Dreadlocks were added. Its face was a little bit more. I think they modified the face, and I wouldn't be able to tell you what the thinking was behind it. But I will say this: we're going to be putting out some pictures of our design soon. And we may even be making a collectible version of our display of our design maquette of the dog.
Yeah, that's cool. You guys did a practical stand-in as well, is that right? I mean, I've seen pictures of a guy on stilts, but I read somewhere that you'd done like the actual face of it for use on set as well. Is that true?
You mean of the dog?
Yes, the dog.
All I ever saw was some foam, like styrofoam, expanded bead styrofoam carvings of the full dog that was, sitting there, that brought in for stand-ins. That's all I ever saw. We never created anything practical for it. But doesn't mean that there wasn't something. Maybe Todd Masters did something. I don't really know.
So the dogs were actually what would have been one of many different type of hybrid creatures that the Predator have. I believe you were also responsible for designing those?
Yeah, the menagerie, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So outside of some little body parts that we've seen in some of the leaked set pictures, we don't really know anything about them, other than that they would have supposedly had some relation to the Predators.
Yeah, they were. I think that the ship crashes, and it's carrying specimens from all over the galaxy. And these specimens, they're using the DNA of these super predator lethal kind of creatures to juice up their own DNA. And that went by the wayside. There was a caravan scene where, a couple of armored personnel carriers with the loonies and the two emissaries with machine guns, which was a kick. I have to say, seeing a Predator shooting a 50 caliber machine gun was a hilarious image that I really enjoyed. But that whole scene went by the wayside. I don't know how far into the effects they got, and I don't know if that might have been part of the reshoot. But the entire attack on the convoy went away, as did the emissaries. So our design work, I think maybe we designed 6 or 8 different creatures, of wide variety of different types of creatures that could be on the loose and creepy and weird. And it all went away. But you will see that on our video. Guess where we show our videos?
Where can we find that, Alec?
Well, there's a place called YouTube, and your computer can take you there. And once there, drive yourself in your imaginary virtual little car to Studio ADI's channel on YouTube and subscribe.
And how many combined viewings have you had?
We have about 360 billion views.
Oh,
and
that's a lot.
70 million. No, I don't know. We've got 250,000 subscribers. Why aren't you one of them?
I am. We are.
Well, I know you are. I'm talking beyond you to the unwashed masses. Come on in, take a bath at Studio ADI's channel.
Before the Predator came out, there were numerous false reports about the fugitive predator being a female. It turned out this was just some misreporting, but the concept of a female predator is something that's often discussed amongst the fandom. Have you ever thought about how you two would approach designing a female predator?
Yeah, we tried to convince them that one of the emissaries should be a female.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'd love to do a female predator. It's a challenge because, what you don't want to do is just fall into that trap of, well, I don't want to diss somebody's favorite Marvel character, She-Hulk or something, but where it's just like a babe. It's just like a predator with boobs, a hot predator.
That's my issue when it comes to the sort of fan designs you see.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, it's a predator with boobs. But if you look at like a predator as we know it is a pretty human-looking, masculine-shaped thing with variations of human musculature. So it's not that far afield other than the head. From a human, so it does stand to reason that you just have some, athletic version of a female body with some changes, tweaks to musculature. But I would look for some difference in it, I think, and then you automatically go to, well, maybe it has 6 breasts, maybe it has 3 breasts, and then you're like, why are we worrying so much about breasts? And then I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you want to get like really alien and say, are predators androgynous, or are they, or hermaphroditic? There are certainly animals, frogs, and things that, So I don't know, but it's an interesting thing. The only thing I wouldn't look forward to doing is dealing with all the executives' reactions to it, which will push it right back to a predator babe with boobs. Because that will be the only thing they can conceive of, and anything else will be too far afield and too frightening to them. So maybe what has to happen is that somebody needs to do fan art that really nails it so that you can just show an executive, look at this, and then all that design work is done, and they can't argue with it if it's great or if it's getting great reaction. I don't know. Now that I think of it, I'm talking myself out of it.
Well, there's plenty of fan art of female predators.
Send me all the links of female predator fan art that you have. If you find it, seriously, I would love to just peruse it all. I mean, I know I can do a Google search, but if you have any that you guys think are...
Yeah, Aaron and I can put together a folder.
Uh-huh.
Also, the androgynous predator idea is something that was explored a bit in one of the books. They called them the Hish instead of the Yacha, and they had like different cycles where they would switch from one gender to the other.
Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, there are fish and frogs that do that.
That one didn't go down so well though, but that book had a whole slew of other problems.
Where's the first use of the term Yautja?
AvP Prey.
Yeah, Steve Perry's first AvP book, which was an adaptation of the comic book, AvP Prey.
God, not only does he sing well, but he writes comic books too.
Yeah, I forgot he was a singer.
Was he? That's not the Steve Perry from...
No, I'm sure, different Steve Perry, but I'm pretty sure the author also...
Really? Oh, well, you must. I guess if you get like, say Steve Perry, sing, what's that song that everybody's, Don't Stop Believing? Isn't that Steve Perry? Don't Stop Believing. That song?
Pretty sure that's not Journey.
Yeah, Journey. Yeah, who's the lead singer of Journey, man? That's not Steve Perry. All right, I'm gonna find out while we talk. Lead singer. All right.
Arnel Pineda and Neil Sean currently sing lead vocals in Journey.
Listen.
Other lead vocalists have included Steve Perry.
Oh, there
Steve
you go.
Perry, baby.
Fair enough.
Still got it.
Not only does he make monsters, he's got better music knowledge than us.
No, there are just some things that flash in my dim memory. They just explode and then they disappear. You could have easily told me, no, the guy's name is Perry Stevens, and I would have gone, oh. Anyway, we're not talking about predators. We're wasting precious time, gentlemen. We've got to get to the bottom of this.
You mentioned your collectibles briefly before, that you guys were maybe planning on one of the dog predators, but you have other collectibles. You've been working with Cool Props in collaboration to produce a collectible bust of the Fugitive. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that and what other replicas ADI had in the pipelines, if you can.
Yeah, the Fugitive is from our production molds, and we're doing what we have done with Sideshow, which is to provide Cool Props with a mold master and paint master that then they can match and give the fans something that is perhaps more accurate than, like, I know. To me, I don't collect a lot of things, but I'm not all that interested in somebody's version of something. I'd rather have the thing, the item, the object, as close to it as I can possibly get. So that's what the Studio ADI line, the collection is, and we're treating them a little bit more like pieces of art than collectibles. The reason that they are costlier is that they're not being made as replicas by faceless, unnamed artists in far-flung places. They're coming right from the studio that designed these things, these characters, for the original films, and in many cases being worked on by the same artists that worked on them for those films. So we can vouch for the accuracy. And we picked the ones that we thought would most attractive to the fans. We also, Fox was able to give us a merchandising deal, but only on characters from Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, and The Predator. But within those titles, there's a fair amount of stuff that we could do. But they are expensive. The collectibles industry there's a reason why these things are made in far-flung places by nameless factory workers and artists there. And that is that it makes them cheaper. And it makes them very affordable. So I realized that having Studio ADI artists in Los Angeles do every step of this work is it adds to the cost. It does, for sure. So we know that we're not going to be selling tons and tons of them. But what's great is that the work goes to ADI artists and they get the benefit of it. And they get, it keeps people employed. It keeps artists who work in a volatile and unsteady business, keeps them able to pay their bills. And that's our goal. And I think now that we have a direct line of communication with the fans through social media, people appreciate that. And a lot of the fans themselves would love to be professional artists. And that's one of the things I say is that you got to be aware that you have to have multiple income streams if you want to survive. So this is our attempt to kind of like keep our crew together in uncertain times,
Yeah, I recently got the swimming alien sculpt myself, which is really cool.
Well, nice. And that's a design maquette, a gestural study that was sculpted by George Duchel. And, it's a little piece of movie history. That
was originally done for Resurrection, right?
Yeah.
Fans were hoping to see an alternate cut of The Predator that would have restored more of your work, but it seems like that's not going to be happening. In terms of our community, the assembly cut of Alien 3 did a lot to turn around people's opinions of that film, and there's certainly an appetite for an alternate cut of the Thing prequel to see ADI's practical work restored. What's your take on alternate cuts, and would you be as eager to see expanded cuts of some of the films you worked on?
Yeah, you cite Alien 3, and that's a great example because people did seem to really respond to that, and I'm glad it got out there. And once again, I'm not against any version of it. As I say, I'd love to see different versions of things out there, and I think it's good for cinephiles. The only thing is that there's an economic model to it that I think is isn't as workable as it used to be. I did a feature film, a very low budget feature film, and I was like, and of course, when I was making the deal with the distributor, I was saying, and of course we'll do Blu-rays with extra features, right? And they said, no, Blu-rays are dead. What do you mean they're dead? People don't buy Blu-rays. Well, that's ridiculous. I know people that buy Blu-rays. Yes, in your limited circles, which they mean the fans of creature effects. That may be true, but Walmart doesn't want to sell them. Walmart doesn't want to sell them with it. So we're going to make DVDs just to have, a few out there that will. And I was like dumbfounded. Like they believe that there is no economic model for Blu-rays with additional features. For my film, I did my own, and I'm not supposed to be selling them, but you can get one if you go to my website and go to the store. And what you do is you order an autographed still or something, and you get a free gift. And guess what the free gift is? It's a Blu-ray. I'm not selling it. It's free. Anyway, but like when you look at like The Thing, people ask that, can we see a cut? Will there ever be a cut of The Thing that has your PFX in it? And I say, I can't imagine that ever happening, because everything that we designed in the film had a digital component to it. It wasn't, what we wanted to do was to, within a frame or within a shot, we wanted to have an animatronic creature that had additive digital aspects to it. Maybe it would be, rig removal or something like that, but more likely it would be adding limbs to it or that's why when you look at our YouTube video of all of our stuff that we built for The Thing, and the stretching neck and the faces are sticking next to each other. Well, there's no limbs supporting that character because those were going to be added digitally, and they were going to be morphing and changing while it kind of like moves in a herky-jerky fashion. So in order to do a completed version of that, you have to spend millions of dollars on digital effects still. You could ask the studio, is it worth spending, let's say, $8 million to do another cut of a movie that didn't make any money? So I think they'd probably not be interested in that. It's not like all the footage is just there, ready to go, and now you got a complete movie.
That saddens me so much. Like, everything seems to be converting to this age of just digital ownership rather than physical stuff. So.
Yeah.
I think a good portion of people still prefer to have physical media. I think there's still a place for it, at least for a while. And even with digital media, people have always liked special features in movies. So
it's such a great learning tool,
Mm-hmm.
Such a just to go watch a movie with a great director talking about what they were thinking when they were shooting something. And that it's to not have it is really it's upsetting. I agree, but everything is based on the economics of it. Unless you get some charitable organization or USC film school doing something for the purposes of education, if it doesn't make money or if they don't think it's going to make money, they're not going to put the money into it.
Well, that's just the reality, isn't it? It's cold hard truth.
I probably we've had a net gain of behind the scenes because you do have YouTube with so much behind the scenes footage. I watched a great thing, like 45 minutes long, on the behind the scenes of the newest Mission Impossible, and I had no idea so much was practical. I thought they were doing face replacement on what's his name, on Tom Cruise when he's riding the motorcycle through Paris, and it's him.
Yeah, no, he's flying the helicopter too. No, I saw some of those. Yeah,
it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Because my assumption is, well, they won't let him do it because they can't insure that, right? Like if he dies or gets injured and can't shoot, the movie's screwed. But I guess because I don't know how they get around that insurance issue. Unless he just says, I won't do it unless you let me hang off a freaking building in the East or something. I mean, he's really unlike any other producer star I think that's ever been. Anyway, so maybe on YouTube there's a lot more stuff like you wouldn't have that kind of thing, I don't think, as an additional feature, just like to be able to sit and watch 45 minutes of unnarrated raw footage. Maybe there is that, but
I hope the studios start to see the value in that more, because I just think back of like how happy we were to get the original Alien quadrilogy on DVD and then Alien Anthology on Blu-ray. Like we had 2 cuts of each movie.
Could you imagine being an Alien fan without those, those features and those insights? Charles de Lauzirika did so much for the fandom with those documentaries and how in depth they were, even in terms of Prometheus.
Would it be the same if they released the film? If you just had to go to YouTube to get all that stuff, do you think the impact would be the same? Is it different having it on a disc or a collection of discs?
I think so. I think there's just something about being able to just dive into a movie, get immersed with not only the movie itself, but everything that went into making it. And I think the internet's just so distracting that having that on a disc and having that physical media really adds to the value, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I grew up with it, and I love all that stuff. So, but I don't know.
There's also the sense that, that the digital stuff could just be taken away. It could just go. If YouTube went down, Fox deleted the video, that kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, as long as you've got a perfectly working DVD player and you've got your DVDs.
Yeah, true. It's true.
Now, I know you're going to be able to say very little about this, but it would be remiss of me not to bring it up, and that is that Neil Blomkamp recently shared a sculpt that ADI did for his Alien 5. And it's of an alien with 2 pairs of arms. Now, back in October of last year, Tom did a Ask Me Anything, and he mentioned a maquette that ADI worked on for Neil. I'm assuming this was that piece?
That is correct.
Again, I know you're not going to be able to say very much about it, but I suppose you just, tell us a little bit about it. I mean, it looks like there's a deliberate recall to the original Big Chap, and it also seemed to follow the multi-limbed or mutated appearance that we also saw in Carlos Huante's concept art for the film that he released.
Yeah, what was Carlos's work? Was that for Covenant?
No, it was for Alien 5, Red Harvest, I think the code name was.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, Carlos was doing stuff for us. That's right. Yeah, Red Harvest. Yes, so Neil came to us, and there were a few different projects, that being one of them, but a few different character and design things that while he was writing the script, he had us working on simultaneous to that. And yes, he very much was interested in recapturing the 79 Alien with some modifications. And that sculpture was done by Tim Martin for us. And we've just kept it under wraps until Neil Instagrammed it, and then we re-Instagrammed it. But it's really, he takes the lead on that. I'm just not going to say much or show much from the project. But as Neil releases it, I get excited. I got very excited when I saw that he released that one, because we were quite proud of that nice little maquette.
And kind of sticking to the topic of biomechanical, after Alien 3, the aliens took on a more organic appearance due to the nature of Alien Resurrection's story. Since then, ADI haven't had the opportunity to create an entirely new alien warrior design, something which we understand was largely due to budgetary reasons for AvP and Requiem. Requiem did feature some biomechanical elements, most notably added to the neck, but it was, as far as we know, a reuse of the Resurrection AvP molds. While some fans expected the prequels to return to the biomechanical, Covenant's alien again retained a much more naturalistic appearance. Do you feel it's about time to return to those original biomechanical designs from the first 3 films?
I think people definitely miss it, and I would like to see a return. I'd also like to see a 7-foot-tall, 160-pound guy wearing a suit as well, if such a guy exists. It's funny because Alien 3 definitely had less of a biomechanical aspect to it. And in our conversations with Fincher, the rationale was that not only does the alien take on some characteristics of its host, which is why in the 79 Alien, it's got 2 arms and 2 legs, but it also has a chameleon-like ability to mimic its surroundings. So if you look at the art direction of the Nostromo and you see all that mechanical kludgery, that's why the creature reflects that, so that it can blend into those surroundings. When you got into Alien 3, it was born of an ox or a dog, depending on which version you watch, but it was born of an animal, so it was on all 4s. And it did not have a surrounding, an environment that was giving it all the high-tech stuff. But so what we did was we took some of the sepia tones from the walls and used it in the Alien, whereas in 79, it was more blacks and metallic silvers with some blues and things. In this case, it became more like the color of the concrete, which was the sepia tones, which is also in Giger's artwork. Giger has a lot of sepia tones in his artwork.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you notice, I skipped over Aliens. Aliens really departed probably, I feel like Aliens is a greater departure in design from the 79, from Alien than Alien Resurrection is. I think not Resurrection. I think Alien 3 and Alien share more of a similarity in creature design because of the dome, because of the spindliness of the creature, and sculpturally as well. I think they share more of a link. Aliens, if you look at those suits, there isn't a whole lot of there's some biomechanical stuff in the head, but like rib cage, very, very bone-like. The suits are very sparse as well. There are appliques of pieces on black spandex, which is the only time that technique has been used in an alien film. And that relies on a lot of slime to make the black spandex disappear. So it's kind of like a skeleton suit. But like if you look at the hands of those aliens, not nearly as biomechanical, certainly as 79, but in a way they're less kind of biomechanical than Alien 3 as well. So it's interesting to me because I think that Aliens is such a great film that people don't really make too much. As far as I can see, you guys would know better than me. As far as I can see, they don't make much of a thing about the departures of design of Aliens, and I don't really hear people complaining about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Am I wrong?
Well, that is still as sort of divisive as any of the others, to be honest. Like, my first experience with fandom was coming online and seeing people bitch about the Queen.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at that, I mean, that's a very organic looking character, you know. Bitching about the Queen. I think the Queen is one of the greatest monsters of all time. And to me, it's also like, I think that the aliens it's a xenomorph. It's changing, you know, it has a great ability to change and to hide itself and to morph into, you know, one thing or another. So like, you know, like you remember those toys, you know, a gorilla alien or whatever, you know, you have that's what's fun about it, to be too locked into it's not to say that you should just trash what Giger did. Lord knows we've been accused of that as if we ever had the authority to just trash what Giger did. But I don't want that, because I still think that the most brilliant design of all of these creatures is what Giger did in the first film. It is genius, right? But at some point you have to go somewhere with it. I think that's where the controversy starts, is that you go somewhere, but it's inevitably not as great as where Giger did, because that was the pinnacle of a career, of a lifetime of developing a language of this biomechanical imagery that he did that was already in place before Ridley Scott even saw the script, before Dan O'Bannon wrote it. That look was in place and had been developed. And that you just don't get that in movies, you know, because everybody sits down with a blank piece of paper and says, what are we doing? You know, and then you try to come up with something that looks that way. But this guy it was already, you know, cut out of whole cloth. So I have tremendous respect for that. I don't, you know, so far I'm not seeing anything that rivals it. The Predator's design comes very close to being, you know, certainly there are those who prefer the Predator over the Alien. It's a tough thing to beat what Giger did in the first film.
And your reasoning behind that, I've never really considered that was all developed so much longer than the film's production. That's a really interesting thought on that.
Well, I mean, it's like, you know, Ridley Scott, we worked with him on his unproduced version of I Am Legend. We did makeup tests. I don't know if you guys have seen those. Have you seen our makeup tests for I Am Legend?
I think I have.
I'm not sure if I've seen that one or not.
Yeah, you should. We have a YouTube channel. Check it out though, because we did work for you know, maybe about 6 months with Ridley when he was going to get that movie off the ground starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it came in $10 million higher than Warner Brothers was willing to spend.
Oh, man.
He took off and did Gladiator. So that was my one opportunity to work with Sir Ridley, and it was fantastic. But we were asking him questions about that, asking about Giger and about how things went. And he said that, you know, Giger was constantly frustrated by the creature effects crew, like the crew that was brought in were more traditional creature guys that had worked on, you know, whatever Doctor Who or whatever they had done. Roger Dickon is a genius, by the way, in my opinion, but they were more of the kind of conventional mindset where they would be like, you know, why aren't we sculpting scales or warts, right? And Giger would have to say, look, this is biomechanical, and show the artwork and convince people that it was going to work. So that must have been, this is what I say about like political battles or behind the scenes travails that I find fascinating. I can't imagine this soft-spoken Swiss guy who's used to working by himself as a fine artist has to now work with a crew of people who don't necessarily share his vision. I don't know this for sure. Maybe they were all smitten by him and they were like blown away by his artwork, but I have a feeling he probably had to step into a world of people who had worked together and were a little bit like he was probably an outsider. And I haven't heard, I know he had a diary, so maybe he talks about that and you guys are aware of it and I'm not, but I find that stuff very, very interesting. But anyway, where was I? I don't know. My blood sugar level has dropped. All right.
Well, on that note, that's actually all the questions we have for you. But before we sign off, is there any anecdote or story or anything that you would like to say that we just haven't given you the opportunity to get into?
Let's see. I rambled so much. I can't imagine that I didn't say everything. I think I talked about did I talk about the YouTube channel? I did.
Once or twice.
I did that. No, I think we'll talk again. You guys want to do this again at some point? Talk more generally. Mm-hmm. We can. Yeah. What else? Anything? Nah.
Fantastic. Right, so Alec, thank you once again. I know we've robbed you of 2 hours of your time and probably your dinner to come and talk to a bunch of nerds on the internet, and we do really appreciate it, and we hope everybody who's listened has enjoyed it as well. If for some wacky reason you're listening to this and you don't already know our outlets, you can visit the website at www.avpgalaxy.net. We're on Facebook as Alien vs Predator Galaxy. We're on Twitter as @AvPGalaxy. We're on Instagram again as Alien vs Predator Galaxy, and we even have a YouTube channel as well. I mean, it's not quite as many views or videos as Alex will tell you about shortly, but you can find us on YouTube as Alien vs Predator Galaxy as well. So Alec, I think you have one or two, places that people might be interested in.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to say thank you very much for letting me come on the show. I do like talking about the stuff, especially to passionate people and for passionate people. But if you'd like to follow Studio ADI, we are on the old Instagrams and Twitter. There's @the Studio ADI on Instagram, and my Twitter and Instagram handle is Alec_Gillis. Tom's is Tom_Woodruff Jr. Of course, you may or may not have heard me pitch and plug my the YouTube channel, but we are on YouTube, Studio ADI's channel. And then if you want to check out our store, if you go to www.studioadi.com, you can cruise around our website and look at our store and stuff, and just have fun learning and looking and all that stuff. And I look forward to chatting with you guys again soon.
This has been Corporal Hicks.
And Ridgetop.
And I'm Alec Gillis. And get into the chopper!
I love it every time. I love it. Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.